Welcome, everybody, to the Professionally Evil Perspective. I'm Nathan Sweeney.
I'm Kevin Johnson.
Kevin, good to see you.
I'm not sure about that. We spent a long time at the beach last week.
We did. Our leadership retreat. I'm using air quotes.
Ooh, it's a leadership retreat now. It was a management retreat last week.
Oh, well, hey, promotion, I guess. Why do they call it a retreat? I never understood. The goal is for us to get in a room and talk about how we move forward. And so They call it a retreat.
Right.
I think it's a French term.
It probably is.
I just insulted. I hope we don't have listeners in France. No, that's.
No, we hope we have listeners in France. We just hope they're not insulted by your joke.
If they're not insulted by my jokes, yeah, they'll be insulted by something. Between the two of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, Disneyland Paris had to close. But
hey, Kevin, why did Disney in Paris have to close?
I'm not answering that question.
What's the sport of where people run and jump off buildings and stuff? What's
Parkour.
Parkour. Do you know why that's French?
I'm not even going there because I know what the answer to that joke is. Are we just decided we're going to make fun of all the French fries?
I think that's it. Yeah.
The
freedom. Whatever happened to freedom fries? That was a thing, wasn't it?
That was so stupid. I'm sorry. That kind of stuff just drives me crazy.
I know.
Hi, I'm going to boycott this thing and call it some funny name because I am a 4-year-old.
You know what? Let's get into our topic.
Yeah.
Because we could rant for a while, but anyway.
We both have other things to do.
Exactly.
So I have to rant later this afternoon.
So today we're going to talk about the FTC, our favorite, not our favorite. You've got several other government organizations that you appreciate much more or less.
Actually, we got to be very clear here. I like the Federal Trade Commission. And not just because I have done work with them in the past as an expert witness.
I was going to say, they've paid you to say that, right?
They've paid me. Nope, they've paid me to do an expert report. They've not paid me to say I like them.
Fair enough.
But I actually think the Federal Trade Commission, it's one of the few places in government where I say, I'm glad there's somebody looking at this kind of stuff. I may not agree with everything they do. I may not agree with how they enforce, right? This is not a blanket approval for the Federal Trade Commission, but I do believe, and they did it in 1914 is how they came about, right? Yes, Wikipedia, but I think that the reasoning behind it, hey, consumers need some form of protection.
Yep.
And I believe, as the libertarian I am registered as, that while small government is important, there are certain things the government is supposed to do, and protecting its citizens is core to that.
Yeah, I look at it. I'm a very, I think politically, you and I are in pretty similar boats. So, anytime you have a group of people that come together as a society and say, hey, we're going to agree on some things, you're going to have things you disagree on.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
When some of those things hurt other people, now that's where you've got to have regulations. And I think it's constantly a challenge of how much regulation is enough or how much is too much and where those are.
Yep.
And those are good arguments, but
not what we're talking about.
Not what we're talking about today. Before we get into that, I can't remember. Was it an FTC case where it was federally determined that you are an ass? I just want that on record.
That was not. Dang it! I wish I'd. No, that was not. That was a Attorney General's Office of Florida case.
Okay.
Where and it wasn't an ass. I was called an asshole by the defense attorney
on record in
a deposition.
Yeah.
And to be very clear, I believe that what I did was completely reasonable. The guy kept repeatedly asking me a question and misquoting my report, and so I simply said, "You appear to be having a lot of trouble reading my report. Would you like me to read it for you?" And he said, "Wow, you really are an asshole, aren't you?" And I was under oath. I had no choice but to say, "Yes, I am." And then the judge asked if I was the asshole guy.
Yeah. So when the judge asked, and you again confirmed, "Yes, I am," that
I was under oath. I had to say it.
And I believe it, if I'm correct, that deposition and all that evidence moved up to a federal case at some point, right?
Yes. So the case, it was a civil case by the Attorney General's office here in Florida against the we're Microsoft, let us sign you up for a help desk subscription and scam you that way. and the company kept reopening, and the Department of Justice finally stepped in and said, this is now a criminal case, and they took the case federal, and I was supposed to be part of that. All the evidence from the previous case was, but it never got to a point where they needed me to testify. So I've never actually officially testified for the DOJ. But yes, my understanding is all the evidence from the first case, including the 2 times I was called an asshole, are in federal court records.
Federal records.
And not divorce court, because I'm assuming it happens a lot there.
Oh yeah, I would expect that. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So what I think we should be talking about today is the Federal Trade Commission just recently announced that they were going to start investigating, and if organizations did not patch Log4j, they could be fined by the FTC or sued by the FTC. And I think there's a lot of headlines around this. There's some misleading things being said.
Oh yeah, everybody on Twitter is like ranting about.
Oh yeah, of course,
unrelated tangents.
Well, and it's funny because the SEC just did the same thing, and nobody's really ranting about the SEC, right? The SEC said, "Hey, if you're a public company, if you're a financial, you need to patch this." And I think I do agree that one of the reasons why the FTC is getting more chatter about it is because the FTC said it across industry boundaries.
Yeah,
there was no, okay, if you take credit cards or something like that, and so I think one of the biggest. I'm sorry.
They were more vague. They basically said if you cause damage to consumers or if you cause any kind of injurious activity, we will come at you.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people are saying, well, if I don't patch, how they're just going to come after me. It's like, no. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer except on Facebook, 2 of my accounts pretend to be. But my understanding is what they're saying is if consumers are harmed, you get breached, and consumers are harmed because of that, they will sue you for that. And if it's because you did not patch Log4j, and I thought it was interesting, they explicitly called out the Equifax case.
Yeah, I saw that.
Right.
Yeah, we'll post a link in the show notes, a link to the FTC article about it.
That was kind of like a passive aggressive threat.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, to me that was this is not a new thing. This is what we did there, right? Like the Equifax, they didn't patch their stuff. There was a big breach. I think it was 140 something million records.
Everybody.
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's a couple of Americans maybe that weren't included in that, but
my daughter, because she was too young.
But the fines, I mean, they had massive fines, hundreds of millions of dollars of fines.
Wasn't it
for
$700 million
something
in
like
fines?
That was in my head.
One case.
Yeah.
Right. Like there were multiple cases about it, but But yeah, I took it as, I totally agree with you. I took it as hey, look, we didn't make this up. We've done it before. We were successful in court, which everything's based on precedent, right? Like, we did it. We were successful, and now we're going to watch you. And so go patch. But I absolutely felt that there was a bit of a threat to it, right? Like, like not only, hey, do we have the authority to do this? But you know what? Last time it was 700 million. Right.
What I thought was unique in this case is every other because there's been some other cases in the past. We talked offline a little bit about Wyndham and Napster and some of the stuff in the past. I don't remember a situation where the FTC came out ahead of time before there was a compromise or a breach of a large person and said, hey, this is the kind of thing that we are going to fine you for. If you are breached because of this,
I believe you're right. What they have done in the past is, as part of a case, they have come out and said, we did this thing.
Yeah.
And now we're going to look for others of the same type. But I think you're right. I cannot think of another time where the FTC has come out in advance and said, there's a vulnerability here. It's bad. And if you don't do something about it and it actually causes harm, we're coming after you.
Yeah. So I want to put a pin in that and come back to it, because I think the implications of that activity are interesting and may have some ramifications. But before we get there, the question I have is, what authority does the FTC have? Like, why do they say, I've looked it up a little bit, but summarize for me, why do they have the authority to fine folks for this type of thing?
And I'm going to be a little vague here because I can't remember the name of the case. I'm blanking on it. And I tried to do some searches to find it, and I couldn't find the specific case. So in 1914, President Wilson, I think,
be about right.
Signed the act that established the Federal Trade Commission, and okay, we're going to do this. And then over the decades since then, let's not say centuries because I feel old already. There have been a number of cases. There have been some other acts that have expanded or decreased. There have been a number of cases where the FTC has sued. And let's be very clear, every single time the FTC sues and wins, it reaffirms or adds to their authority.
Sure.
Right? But there is a case just recently where they were told, no, you can't do that.
Okay.
And so there have been cases that do the opposite, right? But almost all of the Federal Trade Commission's authority that I'm aware of comes from either the initial act from 1914 or case law that has expanded it. And basically it's this idea that, which is why I find it funny that the government has another bureau that is focused on consumer protection as well, that isn't the FTC, which makes no sense to me, but government.
Yeah.
But they have that authority because of that. And I'm not a lawyer, but that's my understanding, is it's all case law that drives it.
So I pulled up the act, the legal act, and this was actually the Federal Trade Commission Act, which was a congressional thing. So there's 5 key points that they're empowered to do. And the one I think that's probably relevant here, I'm scrolling, is to seek monetary redress and other relief for conduct injurious to consumers.
Yeah.
So that to me, that kind of fits in this case.
I think so. The problem I have with it is, and again, I'm not saying, oh man, they shouldn't do that. I just, this is one of those cases where it is so vague, right?
Yeah. But could it be less? I mean, it's like the cybercrime law. I'm going blank. What's the federal cybercrime law?
CFAA.
The CFAA. Thank you. The CFAA is so vague, but there have been so many conversations that if we make it more specific, if you've got a bunch of legislators who barely understand what they're talking about to begin with, if they make a specific law, there's going to be so many loopholes and problems in it that it's not enforceable.
Are you gonna say the tax code? Because that's what I thought of when you said it's so complex and specific.
Yeah. So next episode we're going to talk about the fair tax, and I'm going to explain
why it's a good idea.
Yeah. And no, I think it's interesting. You mentioned Woodrow Wilson, and I don't want to get too much into politics, but Wilson was one of the first big, modern presidents probably isn't the right term, but like he was all about big government. It was very progressive, let's put government in control of as many things as possible. And this is kind of where I wanted that conversation to go about some of the ramifications of this, because are you familiar with the principle of subsidiarity? Have you heard that? You went to Catholic school. You should know that.
I know. That's what I'm saying, is I know that, but I cannot think of what it is.
So it's one of the, I think John Calvin wrote about it. Like, it's one of the pillars of social order that the Catholic Church built out. And really all of Western culture and government is built on those original pillars.
Yeah.
But the idea of subsidiarity is that governing should happen at the lowest possible structure, social structure, right? The city does not need to enforce something that the family can enforce. The state does not need to enforce something that the city can enforce, etc.
Yep.
And so there's a challenge when we talk about federal regulations like this. Woodrow Wilson was very much of the, screw families and cities and states. We're gonna the government.
I don't think that's a quote.
That was not the campaign speech. Yeah, but that was effectively right. The federal government should have much more control over everything and push through some of the stuff. But the question that I have here is, could anybody else do it?
Well, I'm going to throw out there, Woodrow Wilson was in 1914, right? We now live in a society where there isn't the granularity of consumers that we had even 30 years ago, right? I regularly buy stuff from people around the world.
Sure.
Right? I regularly go online. I have no concept where that store I'm buying something from is. All I know is some person in a truck brings a box to my front door and leaves it there. Right? Like, that's it. And so if you had asked me that question 30 years ago, right? I bet you I would say the city can enforce that. The county can enforce that because
or maybe it doesn't need to be enforced.
I'm sorry.
Or maybe it doesn't need to be enforced.
Or maybe it doesn't need to be enforced. Right.
You know,
But
that's an option.
But below the federal government would be where if I got ripped off at a store, I could go to the police department or I could go to a lawyer locally or whatever, right? But now the complexity of consumerism, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
I actually think, and I can't believe I'm saying this because anybody who's talked to me at length knows I tend to stay away from saying the federal government should take on more things. It kind of makes sense at that level. It's right. I don't know that it does, but I don't know the right answer. This is the same thing with every other conversations we have, right? Like, oh, should we have single payer? I don't know.
I think you said a week one of the last episodes recently. You said capitalism sucks, but it's better than every other form that we've tried.
Yeah,
right.
I am sure I've quoted that meme many times, right? Like, like I look at it and go, like, I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day. Oh, I know what it was. So my daughter's looking for an apartment or a house or something to rent, and she found a place. And last night she found it online, and it's $1,200 a month, which is I guess within her range or whatever, and it's rent to own. And I said, she's sitting in the living room at our house. She was over last night. And I said to Denise, you know what we should do? We should rent to own it and rent it to Brenna. And like make her pay us the rent she was going to pay. Right. Then we own a house and we're landlords. That's right. Awesome. And we were joking about, like, lots of people complain online about landlords. I want to be very clear. I've owned a house for 17 years now. I have forgotten how miserable all my landlords were. So now I want to be one, I guess. Right. Yeah. Like, I don't know, but I don't know a better system, right? Yeah. We can't just give houses to everybody. We could, right? I mean, in Valheim, we can give houses to everybody.
All right. Don't tangent.
Valheim is so good.
Yeah. So we may have spent a portion of our leadership retreat playing Valheim together. That was a lot of fun.
May have. We did. But
so hold on, but we don't have a lot of time. But I wanted to get to one thing specifically. Coming back to the conversation about the FTC proactively saying, "Hey, look, this is something that we are going to sue you over, or fine you, or whatever that process looks like." Does that set up scope creep? Because that's something I see all the time with government regulations. Yes. As soon as we regulate this, well, we have to regulate that, and it's not fair if we don't also do that.
I think there's more to it. I absolutely believe there is a level of scope creep, right? Because let's be clear, today is Log4j.
Yeah.
Really, in my opinion, what they are saying is, if you know of a vulnerability and it harms consumers, we can sue you over this. I'm not saying whether or not I think that's okay. I'm just going to say that's what they're doing. Here's the thing that I'm concerned about happening because of this. You and I are old.
You're older, but yes.
I am older. But I know for a fact that you've run the snort.
Yeah.
You were in the industry, IT at least, when intrusion detection systems first started coming out.
Yeah.
Right? Let me ask you if you remember the sheer number of public companies that were told by their attorneys that they should not and could not deploy an intrusion detection system. Because if they found the incident, the intrusion or the suspicion of intrusion,
then they had to act on it.
Way more harm than if they just didn't know. And I expect to start seeing our customers potentially, right? Which is bad because I'm a capitalist. But I expect to start seeing advice from people of not doing vulnerability assessments and not looking at what you're running in your SDLC, because it's more harmful if you knew the vulnerability existed. If you can claim we have no, and I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm not agreeing with this at all. I didn't agree to it when the public companies were told by their attorney. The attorneys were talking out of their ass. They were wrong. But we had probably a decade of big companies not running intrusion detection, which did more harm to consumers than any lawsuit from the FTC.
Yeah.
Because their lawyers told them that if they found it. That's what I'm worried about coming.
I don't know if I've
already seen some law firms saying it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We definitely have those. Hey, we need this pen test to go through external counsel so that they can, we can claim we didn't know about this, or don't tell people about
absolutely.
that. Which that's frustrating. And I get that. I think that's a fear. I think that's something we need to watch out for. I think we also see a trend in the opposite direction. So, for instance, the Capital One breach a couple years ago with AWS, they were fined by the Department of Treasury. I think it was like $80 million.
I want to say it was the Department of Treasury.
Yeah,
Treasury Department.
But what was called out? The fine that was called out was you had this vulnerability that you didn't even know about and didn't know how to look for it. Like you didn't know how to know what you didn't know. And so I know I've had customers come back to me and saying, hey, because of that, we need to be a lot more intentional, not just about finding out what we have wrong, but finding out methods for how we find that stuff out. I think people are being intentional about that. So we could see my concern on the scope creep is that where do you draw the line? Yeah. So are they going to put out a thing saying, hey, if you've got vulnerable jQuery libraries next week, then you're up, on the chopping block? Or
no? And here, I actually think they drew the line well.
Why is that?
I can't believe I said that.
You cut me off guard here.
I know. Here's why I think they drew the line well. They explicitly called out harm to consumers having happened.
But the thing was, okay, that's fair. They're saying if harm to consumers happens because of this. That's fair. But where do you draw that line? I mean, okay.
If I may, I want to add a little bit to that.
Yeah.
It's not just you had harm. The FTC has actually set a pretty high bar for themselves. I don't know that they know how high a bar they set for themselves, right? But you've done incident response. I've done incident response. We know how difficult it is in so many cases, in so many organizations that just have no logging, no information, to actually tie the intrusion back to a specific vulnerability.
I thought you were going to say how hard it is to demonstrate harm.
No.
But to demonstrate, to connect it to a vulnerability.
Demonstrating harm is hard.
Yeah.
But the bar they set for themselves, at least the way I read it, again,
that's interesting. I did
not a lawyer. The bar they set to themselves is not just having harm, but harm due to a specific vulnerability.
Yeah, I didn't read it that way. I'd be really interested if we have friends who are or listeners who are in the legal world, or maybe have a different take on this.
I have friends who are. I have no idea if anybody's listening to this.
Yeah. But, my mom said she downloads it twice just so we get a couple extra
hits. That's nice. Tell your mom thanks.
I don't know that she listens to it, but she downloads it anyway.
Oh, I don't want my mom to listen to anything I do.
Okay, that's right. All right. Well, sorry. Did you have something else you were gonna say?
No, that was it. I think the bar is set pretty high. I just don't know that the courts will understand how high that bar was set.
Yeah. We'll see. It'll be interesting, definitely, to see where this goes. I know for sure in a Democratic administration, there's a lot more appetite for increased regulations at the federal level than there was under a Republican administration. So it'll be interesting to see how that progresses over the next couple of years.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to be following it.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, I wanted to mention to everybody that's listening, we have a class coming up at you and I are going to be in person at Wild West Hacking Fest in San Diego. Way West. That's what, yeah. Wild West Hacking Fest, Way West, right? Yep. Is the full name? And
I think that's how you say it. I always call it Cowboys and Indians Con.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's John Strand's birthday today. Whatever day you're listening to this, it is John Strand's birthday. And,
go tell John Strand. That's the underwear model, right?
No. The Capitol Insurrector.
Yeah, no. John over at Black Hills. Be sure and ping him on Twitter. Let him know that tell him happy birthday and let him know you're thinking about him.
Yeah, everybody should be thinking about him. He's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Kevin. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Definitely.
Bye.
Bye.